Well, hey, thanks everybody for taking the time to be with us today. My name is Ken Anderson, and I'm here to introduce a kickoff or helping to kick off Intersectionality Week at Gonzaga with a program on diversity in the corporate workplace. I would note that you can see in the upper left-hand part of your screen that we are recording this and we put it out on our YouTube channel within probably a week or so. But with that, I want to introduce Haley Wilson. You all pretty much know Haley, GSBA, Director of Diversity and Inclusion, double major, single minor, and looking forward to graduation here in a few weeks. So Haley, thanks for helping to pull all this together, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I know graduation's creeping up really fast. So all us seniors out there, I feel for you. But anyways, yeah, so as Ken said, serving as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion this year, which has been so much fun. If you guys bought a Zags for Black Lives Matter shirt, that was our team that worked on that. And actually James and Alec were really great. And I met with them this year to kind of chat with them about that. And they gave me some advice. So yeah, they were kind of a part of that process, which is cool. But over the summer, I actually had the pleasure of working as an intern in U.S. retail stores operation at Starbucks, which is how I met these two lovely people. So while I was there, I also joined a bunch of partner networks. Partner networks are kind of like clubs here at GU. They have leadership boards, they organize events, they have meetings, and so on. And so they're really all about building community and fostering a sense of belonging, which hopefully reminds people of our mission statement. That's kind of what it aims to achieve as well. And while I was there, I got to attend a bunch of facilitated events and sessions with WIN, which is the Women's Impact Network. So for example, I attended an event all about microaggressions, ability status awareness, and so on. And I was really surprised to see events like the ones my team at GSBA plans actually happening at Starbucks in the corporate workplace. I thought it was so cool. I wasn't expecting it. So today we have Alec Baldwin and James Prince here. They both work at Starbucks. Alec is a community program manager for internal and external digital channels. Did I not say Bateman? Bateman, Alec Bateman. Did I say Baldwin? I'm so sorry. And then James Prince, I know that's correct, is a product manager at Starbucks currently focusing on the STAR program and programming and analytics. So they actually both serve on the leadership board for the Women's Impact Network. And I was so blown away by their ability to facilitate conversation and hold impactful discussions, not only in the corporate world, but also online, as James was kind of talking about online presentations. I was really impressed by that. So today we're really going to dive deep into what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like at Starbucks and in the corporate world, and hopefully give you guys all some insights into firstly why DEI acumen is so important in any career you pursue. Also how those skills can enable each of us to be better allies and coworkers in our careers as well. So first, I just wanted to give the floor to Alec and James to introduce themselves, share a little bit about what they do at Starbucks. And then also at the end, we will have time for questions. So if you guys have any questions, please think of those, write those down, keep those in the back of your mind. So yeah, I'll give the floor to you guys. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Starbucks?
All right, we'll have Baldwin go first.
Happily. Nice to meet everybody. Haley, thanks for that really generous introduction. I will just say, like, right off the bat, we have also a whole I&D team at Starbucks that's like their whole jobs. So as Haley mentioned, we have different roles in Starbucks that have nothing to do with I&D. Well, I wouldn't say nothing to do with it. That's the whole point. But they're not officially having anything to do with I&D. But we also serve as co-directors of our Women's Impact Network, which is one of our employee resource groups at Starbucks. So I'll let James tell the story of the allyship part when we get to that. But I'm Alec. I'm 29 years old, turning 30 in like a couple of weeks. A little nervous about that milestone. One of 8 kids from California, homeschooled, grew up conservative Christian background, and then moved to super progressive Seattle. So I've been all over the place, political ideology and beliefs throughout my journey, just up and down and up and down. Been at Starbucks for 8 years, started out as a barista actually in stores, and then worked my way to a shift supervisor, then a store manager, and then eventually found my way in the building. And in the last 3 years, I've been in headquarters. I'm actually remote now. But I've been working on the communications team. So I oversee our internal communications on a social media platform. So if you think of a Venn diagram between marketing and internal comms, I'm right in the middle of those two.
Fantastic. And I'm James Prince. I am a manager at Starbucks. Effectively, there is a larger process in which all our cross-functional partners get a chance to look at prioritization, financials, portfolio management across the entire portfolio. And I do the reporting and analytics for that process to all the cross-functional partners. Geez, Alec, your introduction was really good. Is there anything else I probably should put in there? Seattle, born and raised, and I have a 2-year-old pterodactyl you might hear in the background, so I'll try to keep my mic muted if he pipes up. And with that, excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. So could you guys share a little bit about WIN? Like, what exactly is it? Why you joined it? And yeah, what do you do for WIN?
Sure, I can go ahead and take the first stab at it. So WIN is, Women's Impact Network is one of north of 12 different partner networks that provide a space for different people with many things in common to leverage time and space during Starbucks working hours to really hone in on the Starbucks mission. So again, for those who are unaware, the Starbucks mission is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. When we think about that and mixing that with I&D and the partner resource groups, Women's Impact Network focuses exclusively on people who identify as women. A little bit of history: the Women's Impact Network went through a rebranding from the Women's Development Network to the Women's Impact Network. When it became the Women's Impact Network, I was effectively brought on to bring more allies to the equation. So from women's development to women's impact, Alec and I really honed in on how do we get more male participation into some of these groups. So instead of the women talking to women about women's issues, it then became women talking to everyone, and then it became everyone talking to everyone about the women's issues. And so I guess I can go into my little story about why I joined, and then I can go and pass it over to Alec. Funny story. A new partner came to our team, and within the first couple weeks wanted to join the Women's Impact Network and get into the board. And I didn't know much about the network, but she effectively said, how can I even join? I've only been here a couple of weeks. I don't know whether or not I can add a lot of value. And I said, hey, you know what? Join the board, and who cares? You've been here a couple of weeks. And if you join the board, I'll even go to a Women's Impact Network coffee tasting with you. So she joined the board, and I lost the bet, and I had to go to the Women's Impact Network coffee tasting. I started walking to the room, and the room was all glass. And when I looked inside and saw 100% women, north of 60 women in a room, I instantly felt different and the other. And I turned around, and I was going to just tell Nicole, who is the person I was going to tell her I couldn't find the room. And as I was walking down the stairs to leave the coffee tasting, she comes up the stairs, and she's like, "James, you're here, great." And I ended up having to go to this coffee tasting. And when I was there, it was a presentation on women in politics, and I found it incredibly interesting. Long story short, the coffee tasting's over, and she says, "James, what do you think? You want to keep coming?" And I said, "Nicole, I don't think I need to go to these. I treat women just like everybody else. As a matter of fact, I don't even pay attention to the fact that they're women. And I said that out loud. And I'm pretty self-aware. And I realized that that is just like the colorblind statement, right? I want to be viewed as a Black male. When someone interacts with me, I want to be interacted with as a Black male. And to interact with me any less than that or different than that is a disservice to me and to the other person. And when I realized that I had a problem by not addressing the fact that I don't see gender, right? Is when I decided that I definitely need to get involved as soon as possible. And with that, I guess I can go ahead and pass it on to Bateman so we can get to some good questions.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that. I do want to be cognizant that we are not necessarily the best spokespeople for why WIN exists, as we are both men. But we are part of the allyship branch, or the allyship branch. So that's our area of expertise. But I just wanted to voice it. So coming from that, I like to describe myself as like the apex of privilege. I'm white, I'm cis, I'm heterosexual, and didn't come from poverty. So as I've become cognizant of my own privilege throughout my life, I also became cognizant of allyship. And just barely, the first time I heard that term was in relationship to LGBTQIA. I didn't really understand you can be an ally to anyone with privilege. I just kind of really thought, okay, allies are to people who are within this community. I also didn't really understand how I fit into any of these groups. I thought they were cool. I knew that they existed. I didn't really think that there was a place for me, which again is reflective of privilege. I never had to look around and be like, where's the community of people who look like me? Because a lot of people my entire life look like me. But I'm friends with a lot of women, and I'm a communicator, and was just going around meeting people. And I had a certain coffee tasting with someone, and she said, hey, have you heard about WIN? I'm like, yeah, I'm familiar with it. And she said, you should join. I think that we'd really like to have someone with your perspective and ability to speak on our team. And my first response was, isn't that the opposite of what you want? Like, you want some white guy with a big mouth to jump into this space and be like, yeah, let me talk about feminism. And she was like, no, we absolutely need men who are willing to speak about these issues, but as an ally. So that was the first time I was really introduced to it. She hooked me up with James, and he was kind of building this out from the ground up. I think we've been on a whirlwind of a journey over the last 2 years. We've been doing this together. A little anecdotal story I'll share. So when James stepped out on paternity leave, he asked me to step up. Up until then, I wasn't a co-director. And I'd kind of watched how he navigated the space. So as soon as I took over, I just shut up. For me, allyship was just shutting up, because I was super privileged and I was comfortable speaking, and I talked my whole life. So I just would sit in these meetings representing allyship and just didn't say a damn thing. And one of our co-chairs took me aside and was like, hey, you're not participating, you're not saying anything. And I was so afraid of saying the wrong thing that I wasn't doing anything. And she basically told me something that I'll never forget, which was that if you're too afraid to make a mistake, you're never going to learn. Right. So if you want to be an ally, you're going to mess up. You're going to say the wrong things. You will 100% alienate people, but you can apologize and you can learn from that space. So that was kind of the beginning of my stepping into this allyship journey.
I just got so excited to hear you guys talk. It's just so fun. Thanks for sharing that. Kind of just expanding on what you've already said. What is it like being a male identifying person on this leadership board for WIN? So what are some of those challenges that you faced? How have you overcome those challenges? And maybe specifically, like, what kind of learning has occurred in this role? As you've kind of already spoke to it, but maybe to hit at it more specifically. I
can take this one first, just because my brain's already spinning with that. Like I mentioned, I'd never really been a minority. That's the definition of privilege. I've never really walked into that room was glass that James is talking about. It's not an exaggeration. It's very unique, but there's just all these walls, and all you see are who's in that room. And I had the same experience, and never been around a table where I was the only man. And that's not necessarily true. At Starbucks, we're actually 65% women. Like, as a company, we're more demographically women. White women specifically. But at the same time, I never had to represent my gender to anyone. I never had to be the male voice and give the male perspective on anything. So it started with a lot of fear, I think. And then the second thing I'll say is that the bar was so low. It still is really low. Like, if to any men who are sitting here, the bar of entry of being an ally is just the bottom level. I'm a husband and it's the same thing. Like, I'll do the dishes and people are like, oh my God, she's so lucky. And I'm like, how did we get here? So I think the first year it was so easy, and my ego was all part of it. I was celebrated. I would say the right thing and be super woke, and people were like, "Oh, that's great." And then when Black Lives Matter happened and the world changed and everything pushed to the surface, I realized, and everyone started talking about allyship, I realized my ego had become so involved in my identity as an ally that I was just attaching to that and finding all this value in this, like, patting on the back of my little fragile ego about being an ally. And so I had to kind of like disassemble that. So I said earlier that my first thought was allyship is shutting up. And James and I, while leading these discussion series, came up against that over and over. Like, how do you boil it down? What's one thing, 3 tips? And what we realized is that it totally depends. It depends on the moment. It depends on the meeting. It depends on the relationship. It depends on the skin color, the sexual orientation. Every single factor changes all the time. So maybe a year ago, I would have been like, oh yeah, being an ally is this. And now I'm like, it's a world. Being an ally is just like constantly growing. It's different from last week. It's different in every relationship. Sometimes it's thumbs upping a message on Teams is what we use instead of Zoom. Sometimes it's not heaping and saying, actually, that was Marissa's idea. Sometimes it's really uncomfortable. And I've been talking for a while, but I'll share one last story of like allyship, an example. So right a year in, I'm feeling good. I'm like, this is cool. This is who I am. I got asked to speak on this daughters and sons to bring your kids to work day panel. Stoked. I was super excited. I love speaking. I felt cool to be represented. Afterwards, I come back to my team where an Asian American woman friend of mine was, and she was like, how was it? And I'm showing her the photos, and up there on the stage, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 white people. Not a single person who wasn't white or didn't identify as white in that meeting. And she was like, that's kind of messed up. And so I'm like, yeah, I didn't even think about that. It's totally messed up. Just empathizing with her. And she's like, so you should say something. And I was like, oh, me? Why do I have to say something? And she was like, because you were on the panel, you were invited, and you have that relationship. If I say something, they're going to think of me as the angry Asian girl who wasn't represented. And I was like, well, I don't want to say something because it was an honor. They asked me. It was super nice. I don't want to offend them. And that was the first time I was like asked to step into it professionally in a really uncomfortable way. And so, yeah, allyship can be anything, and I'm still learning.
That's such a great story. So going into your first question, what is it like being a male identifying person in this, in this space? I would say it's really scary and really humbling, really echoing off of what Alex said, because you're going into a space where not only are you at work, right? You're still at work, right? And everything you're going to say will be magnified because you're in a woman's space at work, and you're trying to be an ally, and as Alex said, you're going to get everything wrong. What you're saying is going to be wrong. So I would say that's the biggest feeling. Now, when it comes to what kind of challenges, most of my challenges have been internal, right? In which, how do I not come into this space trying to fix things, right? For me, very action oriented. How can I fix it? What's the problem to solve? How can I fix it? And and to be able to fix things without taking up a lot of space, I think is really difficult, and I don't know how to do it. And so I think that that's the greatest challenge. How can I do what Alec does so well, which is, sit back, create space, and shut up, right? Especially given that it's not really my brand. But to your last question of what kind of learnings have happened in this role, I've learned that it's very important to just acknowledge first that even something exists or that something's going on, right? Through all of these, we have the, through these monthly discussion series that we have, my success criteria is, what does attendance look like? Did we learn anything from these people in order to be able to go fight the patriarchy or whatever we're trying to fight in the moment? But what I've realized is that's not what the members are looking for, right? Sometimes the members are just looking for validation, right? Sometimes the members just want to say, hey, look, like I share that experience with you, right? And it's taken me about 2 years to understand the importance of validation. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'll just echo on that real quick. that fixing it mindset has been a hard one to move away from. And specifically, like, we're asked to be board members, we're co-directors, we're building our own committee, we're doing something, we're fixing something, and having to step back and balance that speaking up and shutting up, speaking up and shutting up, and when to give space is huge. And I think it all comes from just like an awareness, like, and that's what James was saying about just acknowledging that, like, constantly being aware of the space you're taking up. Should I provide a perspective here? Do I stand back, etc.? So if I did at this point in time have to boil down the one thing of allyship, I think it starts with just tremendous awareness. The very first coffee tasting I went to that James led, it just was explaining, like, what does it take to be an ally? And the first step was exhibiting as little sexism in your own behavior. And I remember thinking, like, what? Obviously you should do that, but it's actually not obvious. That still is the bar, being consciously the most aware of yourself and your own, like, it's the same thing with racism. Like, as soon as you're able to say, I exhibit racism behaviors, I made a racist thought decision, then you're able to work on it.
Yeah, thanks for your guys's just transparency and honesty too. And thinking about, like, a lot of people here are students, or a lot of them are probably business students as well, right? This is an event in partnership with the School of Business. And something that I think is really important for business students to learn is what you guys are sort of embodying, is there's so much opportunity and calls to action in the workplace to be an ally, to be involved in DEI, right? And to also learn those skills and implement those skills in the workplace. So our next question kind of gets at that. So why is diversity awareness, acumen, experience, whatever you may call it, essential or important in the corporate workplace, and then also to your guys' individual careers or professional development?
So this will be my first time saying this, so it may not be hyper eloquent, but I think that diversity of thought is the most important diversity needed from a workplace perspective, right? And I'm not trying to trivialize diversity in race, gender, and so forth, but diversity of thought is incredibly important for any organization to do well, right? Diversity of thought is loosely correlated to diversity of experiences, and different groups have a disproportionate amount of different experiences. And being able to connect the dots between what you do know about your experience and what you don't know about others' experiences, or creating a space in which the other person may not have to explain their entire experience within a 30-minute meeting to you, is incredibly powerful in fostering an environment that is not toxic. So when I'm at a happy hour and I have a colleague of mine who says at 7 o'clock when it's bright outside, hey, it's getting late, I think I'm going to go ahead and call an Uber, instead of me being like, well, why does it have to be so early? Why don't you do it at 10 like I do, right? And not have to have my colleague explain to me, hey, as a woman, I don't feel very comfortable all the time at 10 o'clock p.m. on a 30-minute drive to West Seattle, right? In order to get around those types of conversation, I think it's incredibly important to be able to have an awareness of that diversity, right? That's number one. Number two is one that might be a bit personal to me. Alec, let me know if I'm off base on this one. But at Starbucks, rapport building is number one, because you can't get anything done without anyone else. No one at Starbucks gets everything, like can grab a project, run with it, and be successful. And an important part of that rapport building is having an experience, having an awareness, or having some type of a diversity acumen, because especially with how diverse, or I consider it diverse, but other people may not, how diverse Starbucks is, it's essential to you being able to just be successful in your own career.
Yeah, I don't think you're off base at all. When Haley sent me the questions, I didn't pay attention, and I thought I was supposed to answer them like a questionnaire. So I was like, I write all day. So I wrote like a book to answer this question. And she was like, that's great. I'm going to be asking it live. But the reason why is because it's endless. How does D&I, or as we call it at Starbucks, IND, I like DEI because it has equity in it, which is great. How does it benefit you as a person, as an individual? I could talk about this forever. I'll try to boil it down. But it makes you a better leader because you're able to understand people's experiences. Like James said, it makes you a better communicator. The ability to know, like we were just talking about, when to shut up, when to speak up, how to read a room, to sit in your thought for a second and ask yourself it in your head before you say it out loud, when to speak up when you're terrified and be like, okay, now I have to say this because I know that there are people who I've told I'm an ally and are friends of mine, and they have this question, but they're not going to say it. Now I have to do that. That is an amazing skill, like courage. It's given us so much visibility, like in interacting across the network. I can't tell you, James, this is true, the amount of meetings I get in where I'm like, hey, I'm Alec. And they're like, yeah, I know who you are. You're the allyship guy with James and Win, which is awesome. It's not a bad brand to have, but it truly makes your entire organization better. When I was interviewing our co-chairs about Women's History Month one year, I think 2 years ago, they used the all boats rise analogy, and they were talking about women in community and how women are such community builders. And when you make the world a better place for women, you make the world a better place for everybody. And I think that can be said for any community. Like when we are thinking about and challenging what success looks like, what communication looks like, what connecting looks like, and we're not looking at it through the lens of the patriarchy or whiteness, and we're really looking at it completely differently, then we're making our organization just better and better and better. And that's something I like to tell. I like to think of myself as a safe space with people in our organization. Like if they ever have a moment where they're like, what the hell was that? I'll ping them and be like, I feel you. You can talk to me about that thing. But there's a couple of women in our public affairs org who they're pushing up against the edges of things that are challenging and hard for us to, as Starbucks, to admit about ourselves. And they get a little bit of feedback, and then it feels like, well, maybe I said the wrong thing. And so in talking with those people, I always say, you're making us better. You're making Starbucks better. Every single time you say something that makes people a little uncomfortable and pushes back, but for the right reasons, you are making us better. Don't give up. Don't stop. We're going to change as an organization because of you.
Well said.
Yeah, I love the long answers. Don't hold back. Thanks for sharing. No worries, Alec. So kind of on the same thread here, thinking about a lot of us might be graduating or thinking about moving into the workforce, right? Why is involvement in your corporate community beneficial to one's career? There's obviously so many opportunities. There's so many partner networks besides Win at Starbucks, right? And so why should new graduates get involved in their corporate community, and maybe tips for how to do that if people aren't quite sure how?
Alec, you on first? Let me take this one.
Yeah, I can just piggyback since it was already what I was saying a little bit, like the whole point of network groups. So I was 5 years in stores before I came into here to the headquarters, and I didn't really understand them. Like I don't have a corporate career background at all. My wife does. And she was explaining once that one of her reviews, they had said like, oh, you need to be more involved in these clubs. And I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Just like do your job and do your job well. Why does that have anything to do with your success? And then at Starbucks and headquarters, I started to understand it. Like James is a completely different part of the org than I, and now he's like one of my best friends at Starbucks, and I've learned so much from him. But every single woman on our board, the amount of people in our little coalition, our last meeting was about data and women in analytics, like that has nothing to do with my world. And it just has completely widened my scope and my abilities. I'm able to talk about this in my development conversations. James and I effectively built our own org within when they just made us board members, and then we just built a coalition of people and gave them jobs, and like a survey team and a quantitative and qualitative team. And we sent reports to executive leaders. Like I've had phone calls with Kevin Johnson where he's been like, yeah, I know who you are because of my work within this. And obviously that's not the main reason. And James and I'll joke about this. I don't know if I'm being too vulnerable, but he'll always call me like hippy dippy because I joined because I wanted to be a better ally. But the other reason people join these things is to develop their career, to grow. Like if I can talk in a meeting about how I've networked with our CEO and led an event that he hosted with 155 attendees, like that looks really good on my resume. So there's a ton of reasons for your career that you should join these.
Yeah. There's there's three that I think of. Number one is the fill your cup, right? Which is you're at work a large portion of your life, right? And to be able to bring your authentic self to an area and to be able to learn and grow, because that's 8 to 10 hours a day that you can't be on your phone going through the news trying to learn about what's going on, right? You actually get a chance to dive into the community and learn at the ground level what's going on, right? That's number one. Number two is the networking perspective, right? That Alec just mentioned. And I'm going to skim over that because I think that in college we learn a lot about that. But the third reason that is, I think it's a must-have to join a community, is because when you are looking for your next role and you scroll down to the bottom to see if you fit the requisition, and you see those little bullet points that you're like, oh, I don't have that. I don't have that. Oh, I need that, right? The easiest way to meet all those requirements is to do it outside of your actual role. And by joining any of the partner networks, if you want to learn how to do Tableau, you can go into the partner network and be like, hey, look, I'm trying to learn how to do Tableau. I need a use case. How can I help, right? Or if you're trying to learn how to manage a budget because that's what you need to get into your next role, well, go to the Welcoming Refugee Alliance and say, hey, look, I'm trying to improve my budget management skills. How can I fit in, right? If there's, obviously there's that challenge where, certain groups feel like they have to hit 100% of the requisition before they apply, and other groups do not feel that, right? But to the extent that you are trying to still hit all those different bullet points at the bottom of the requisition for you to get to your next role, take those bullet points, take them to a community and say, this is what I'm trying to do for the next 6 months to a year. So I can, when I get into an interview, I can say, these are the things that I've done along those lines. And I think that for me is one of the most powerful reasons to get into one of these communities. Now, caveat, I joined because I found that I had a blind spot. And it took me almost 1.5 years to realize what I just said, right? So I'm hoping I'm saying it now so you can go in and say, not only do I want to fill my cup by filling my blind spot, but I also want to fill my pockets, right? By hopefully hitting some of these bullet points at the bottom of the requisition.
Yeah, I mean, I can even echo that. In my time in school, I feel like I've learned so much more in my positions, like being director of diversity and inclusion, being a social justice peer educator, like being involved on campus rather than just my coursework. I think that's huge. So yeah, everyone start thinking about those questions. We have 2 more questions, one formalized, one sneaky fun one at the end. But then, yeah, hopefully you guys have some questions because as you can tell, they have a huge wealth of knowledge and love to share, which is really appreciated. So moving on, could you guys tell us a little bit about the Starbucks mission? You sort of talked about it, but also why caring about your company's mission is important to you and to your career. Again, as we're kind of stepping out of school and looking for our next place, it can be easy maybe to just take whatever comes up or whatever, but what's important about, really loving your company's mission or feeling like that makes sense to you?
Yeah, I can take this one first. So as I mentioned, I've been with the company for 8 years. In February, started five years I spent in stores, started as a 21-year-old who just liked coffee, and Starbucks is such an iconic place in people's lives. I'd go, the first time I had my driver's license, I went and got a Frappuccino from Starbucks because I thought it was coffee, and now I would never in a million years drink a Frappuccino. But that you go through the training, and there's a little letter from Howard Schultz, and there's to inspire and nurture the human spirit, which is just interesting words for an organization. And not to get too meta, but I feel like what an organization has changed in the last 4 years, 5 years. Has changed so much. The expectations we have from corporations even, and like the accountability we're demanding from them. But when I started, I had no understanding of any of that. I wasn't interested in business. I just liked people and storytelling. And Starbucks had done such a good job of building that reputation and community that I stayed. I stayed after each promotion. I stayed after each position. I never thought I'd be here 8 years, but it aligned with who I was as a person. And I was able to continue to grow. Even the work within Win, like I often say it's the most fulfilling work that I do. My favorite points. And this is how I'm spending an hour of my time on the clock right now. Like, this is part of my job. And that never would have been something that I imagined could have been part of my job. So I think to be a little more vulnerable about it, like, it's hard to find a company that's a perfect fit, that you find that every part of it doesn't break you down. I was really bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when I got to corporate, and I expected it to be like Willy Wonka's factory and the Mecca, like when the stores partners have really unique relationship with headquarters. Not everybody at Costco is like, gosh, I hope I work in Costco one day, but a lot of people are baristas. They want my job. They want to be here and working in this company. And I was really let down the first year because I did see a lot of privilege, and I did see a lot of like gatekeeping and people who had the same type of communication, and you get stuck with one boss who isn't the right person, and that's your whole experience. So it was really challenging for me, but I think in the last couple of years, I've come to realize that like, it's never going to be a perfect fit, right? But it's so important that you find a company that you can grow in, that you can get some skill sets that you need, and that aligns at least somewhat with who you are as a person, what you value. Starbucks pays for mental health, which is one of our amazing benefits. So we have therapy, but also life coaches. And that's something my life coach through Starbucks like helped me understand, is like, yo, like James says, what fills your cup? That's a phrase we use at Starbucks. Do you like to talk? Do you like to listen? Are you good at data? What is it that you're good at? And deeper than that, like, what drives you to get up and work every day, And so if you can't find that in your day job, it doesn't matter how much money you're making at the end of the day. James may disagree with me. I don't think you would though. Like, not to share your story, but like, you've turned down jobs that weren't the right fit because of how full your cup was at Starbucks. And my wife has gone through a similar thing. No matter how much money you're paid, if at the end of the day, what you're doing doesn't align with who you are, it'll never be enough.
I wonder if we've lost James to the
Wi-Fi. I thought he was just so thoughtful.
And it's a good pose though, I will say that.
Oh no.
I anticipate he'll pop back in.
Yeah, he'll probably try to rejoin.
Yeah, but yeah, it's so cool to hear you talk about that, because I think a lot of the work, oh, here he is.
We lost you.
Terrible. I hope it doesn't happen right before the fun part. My favorite part is the ad hoc questions, right? So I'm like, this is the part where I want to be here, right? Oh no, I want to be here the entire time. Let me rephrase that. So where are we at?
We were talking about why it's important to like the mission and value of Starbucks, and working somewhere where, yeah, I think you dropped out when I talked about you too. So we're in the clear.
Yeah, well, I'm sure all bad things. Well, so, but this is recorded, so I'll go back. I'll listen to it again. So, this was a really difficult question for me, especially when you break it down into two different parts, right? Which is, why is the mission important to you? And then why is it important to your career, right? And I don't know how to communicate why it's important to me, because I find it intrinsically valuable to I find the betterment of the people around me intrinsically valuable, right? And I don't know why. And I'm almost proud that I don't know why, because that's a testament to the fact that it's intrinsic, right? Like I don't know. I like better, right? And to be able to work for a company that that's mission is the betterment by virtue of profit, by virtue of I can potentially send my kid to private school while also contributing to the betterment, is to me like the apex of where I want to be and what I want to do, right? I was talking to my sister-in-law, and she's like, well, if you didn't have to work for Starbucks, what would you do? And I said, I actually like my job. Now, maybe I might be at maybe a nonprofit, but her name's Bahare. I was like, Bahare, I like where I'm at, right? And not only do I get a chance to work on the betterment of people, but I also get a chance to make some money doing it, and I also get a chance to hone my skills just in my actual career. And so I get that gets to kind of the second part of your question, is why is the Starbucks mission important to your career? People talk about burnout, right? It is really difficult to burn out when you feel fulfilled in what you're doing, right? To what I mean, it's and I think that when you think about longevity in career, and when you think about spending 8 to 9 hours of your life with the same type of people, having those people have the same understanding about the betterment that you do, given the mission of Starbucks, just really lightens the load.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think looking at the clock, we'll move into our Q&A portion, as now I know it's James's favorite part of the day. So hopefully you guys are thinking through some questions, but yeah, I'm sure James and Alec would be happy to share about lots of facets.
You said you had a fun question.
Yeah, what about this fun question?
You can't tempt us and then leave the fun question off. We'll be quick, we promise.
Yes. Fine.
Okay. Well, my question is just, what's your favorite memory or event from Win? Or you could also just say in relation to DEI at Starbucks if you don't want to talk about Win more.
That's so hard. Never mind. Let's go to Q&A.
No, I got my favorite. My favorite one was we hosted a discussion series on LGBTQ plus IA, dang it, this is recorded. I don't know if I said that right.
You got it.
I got what?
You threw the plus in a weird place, but you hit them all.
Okay. So we have a before discussion, right? In which we meet with the people that are going to come into the call. And one of the partners said, I would really like it if we introduced ourselves with our pronouns. And I said, oh yeah, sure, no problem, we'll do that. Then the next week we had the discussion, and it didn't even dawn on me until midway through that this partner, was vulnerable enough and was nice enough, and was trying to educate me on the importance of doing that in that particular instance, and I missed it. And to me, I know that's not I guess it's my favorite memory, because that's the biggest learning that I think I've ever had. It's a terrible learning, but it's the one that sticks out the most to me, and I don't think I'll ever forget that.
Yeah, I'll be fast. I'll piggyback on that a little bit, but that's cheating. But that was the hardest part I've had in Win. Like afterwards, this partner who does use she, her pronouns, she set up time with us, and she just gave us feedback on how it went. And we were like, not used to that. These normally go super well. People are like, wow, great. And she's like, hey, do you don't mind if I give you feedback? And at first I was like real upset. Like it was really heavy for me. And it was about like the amount of space we were taking up in the room. And I'm like, we're hosting a discussion. You asked us to be allies. How the hell are you going to tell me I'm taking up too much space when I made this space to talk about this thing. But it was like one of the most important learnings for me. And it was like that pivot of the, like, it changes in every situation. And afterwards, I was super grateful for her calling us out. My favorite moment in like D&E, which is huge, was last Friday, when I found out my peer got promoted to be my boss, who's one of my friends and who's a woman, and they didn't give her a promotion. They just gave her headcount without the title and the money. And I was like, that's messed up, to my VP just in the middle of the conversation. And I said, I'm supposed to be an ally and her friend. And I just want to like go on record formally saying that you should pay her and promote her more. And it turns out that is part of the plan. It just isn't happening immediately. And it's not always that cut and dry and corporate. But it just was a reminder of like, I don't think I would have done that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, would have thought it wasn't my place. This is that. So a decision's already been made. They're not asking me for my opinion. I never would have just immediately said, hey, no, you can't just give her a head count and not pay her more. She's a phenomenal leader. So I'm getting a little emotional thinking about it, but those are, I think that's when allyship is alive and real. It's not when we lead these cool discussions. It's when you're in a one-on-one with someone that you're intimidated by, who's your boss, and you have the opportunity to like stand up for someone.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. It's all about in those moments where it's scary and you have to be courageous, right? But yeah, okay, well, awesome. Thanks for answering that fun question. Okay, questions. Let's give it to them. Who has a question? I know somebody has a question. Anything's fair game.
Oh, Nate.
Yeah, so thank you all, first of all, for being here. Thank you, Haley, for bringing everybody in. This has been really, really cool and great to learn a lot about how allyship really works at a higher level, because I'm sure it looks really different. But then there's also a lot of similarities between allyship and the corporate level and in university. I'm wondering, when it comes to situations where you both talked about where you maybe don't feel like you're an authority or sometimes don't even feel like you should be there speaking up. What are some tactics that you use in those moments to keep yourself from fading into the background, to keep yourself from wanting to walk away, and to find ways to participate when you maybe don't feel like you have a voice in that situation?
You want to go first, James?
Always, but I try to keep my mouth shut. Yeah, so first and foremost, I still walk away from some of these things maybe 5 to 10% of the time. So I don't want to make it seem like now every time there's an issue or every time I think I need to get space, I need to that I play the superhero role and go in and do it. Sometimes I'm too scared. Sometimes I still keep my mouth shut, right? I'm still at work. So I just want to offer that caveat before I kind of move forward. Because we're all still human and we all still are worried about maybe being offensive, right? We're still worried about asking the wrong questions, right? And there is such thing as asking the wrong questions. And the reason I say that, and I know sometimes they say there's no such thing as wrong question, but questions that show that you haven't done your own due diligence on what you're about to talk about. And now all of a sudden in this time, in this space, you want to pontificate on something that you haven't done the research on and try to show how smart you are by asking a question that is 1 + 1 when everybody else is trying to talk about exponents. I think that's the wrong question, right? I think you might need to keep your mouth shut, go educate yourself, then come back to the discussion, or ask somebody you trust. But the latter part of your question is, how do you move past that? Tara Mohar's book, Playing Big. We read it for Women's Impact Network. It talks about Yara, which is an energy that you get. It's like a nervous energy that comes inside of you, trying to tell you to like, this is your limit. Don't go further. Don't go past. Right. I think recognizing that, I hope it's called Yara. I read the book last year, but recognizing that energy sometimes that energy means that you're in the right place and you're doing the right thing, right? And so for me, when my hands get sweaty before one of these conversations, that's how I know I'm doing it right. Because if my hands aren't sweaty before these conversations, I'm probably not pushing the envelope. I'm probably not adding as much value as I'd like, blah, 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 blah. Is that helpful, Nate?
Absolutely. That's super helpful. Really, really nice to know that, even at the level that you guys are at when it comes to DEI, that there is that nervousness still, and to recognize that it's healthy to be nervous when you don't know something, but that's an opportunity that shows that you can learn something in these situations. So I really, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And the only thing I'll add to that, because James spoke so eloquently, is again, for me and my identity, I remind myself of my privilege. Again, during the civil unrest this summer, it was hard to navigate and everyone was angry and it was like, what do I do? And James and I led a discussion. I think, Haley, you went to this one around like social media and allyship and like, do you speak up or do you not? Do you text your Black friends? Do you not? Is that weird? Like, what do you do? And I was listening to this podcast called the Guilty Feminist, and someone on it was talking about privilege and how we're like ashamed or afraid of privilege. And we're like, oh, sorry, I have this privilege. And she was like, it's a tool, you can use it, use your privilege. And that's exactly what I use to like counteract that feeling, if it's YAR or whatever it is. Like, and I think I gave that example earlier where I was in a meeting and a discussion where I had had conversations with 3 different peers who were all not cis white men about how they felt. And we went into a discussion where they asked, does anyone have anything to say? And one of them like chatted me and was like, I'm so glad you're here in this discussion for me because I know you'll speak up. And I was like, F, now I have to do it. But it was that reminder, like privilege is not a burden, it's a responsibility. I'm lucky that I have it and I'm going to use it for the rest of my life instead of being like, oh, I'm ashamed that I have it.
Thank you so much. It's definitely an important reminder and something that, as a person who has always had privilege as well, it's always important to remember those things and to be active about them as well, not just passive about it. So thank you.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions if anybody has one.
I have a quick question, and it kind of relates to the last answer, but I was wondering if y'all have any like favorite podcasts and books on DEI that you would recommend. I know that y'all mentioned some in like your previous answers, but just curious.
Yeah, the Guilty Feminist was great. I don't know, so I use Instagram. I'm like a millennial, but maybe on the middle side of millennialism, so I use social media a lot still, maybe more than I should, and I follow a lot of people. I'll try to get a list to like Haley afterwards. Wasn't prepared for that one, but I follow a lot of people who share a bunch of resources and they'll like share books as well. That was a terrible answer.
Not as bad as mine's going to be, right? Mine is I don't have any podcasts or any books because I lean on 2 things. Number one, I lean on themedium.com in order to get different anecdotal perspectives, right? So I'll wake up in the morning and I'll go through Medium and I'll be like, oh, and 12 reasons why you're a jerk because you're Black and male. I'll read that, right? But the second thing I lean on a lot is if there is something I don't understand, whether it's a situation, someone says something in the news that is maybe counterintuitive. I don't know if it's the right word, but I almost nerd out on trying to understand the root cause of whatever it is. And because of that, I don't have maybe a formalized, like, here are some podcasts that I use, or here are some, what you call it. But what I do is I recognize when there's a gap and I will get lost in Wikipedia, clicking on links, and getting as deep as I can within the amount of time that I have to at least learn a little bit more about whatever the root cause is, right? So for instance, with the George Floyd thing, right? I think it's easy to stop it at Chauvin, right? It's easy to stop there. But if you look at the root cause, and this is recorded, so I don't really know to what extent I can even think through this, but it doesn't stop with Derek, right? Like It's what other, like, are we curious about what other states or what other precincts or what federal rules are around this, right? Are chokeholds legal in different places? Is it legal to put your neck on your knee on someone's body or whatever, right? I don't want to get into the political part, right? But don't just stop at what CNN says, right? Dig deeper and do research. And that's what I do. I nerd out on trying to figure out the root cause and going past whatever I'm being told.
Thank you.
All right, does anyone have one quick final question?
I have a quick statement. Is that
Perfect.
fair? Okay, so somebody point out. I like to talk and take up space. Here's the deal. With allyship, the biggest thing is being afraid to put yourself out there, learn, and so forth, right? Do the work before you need to become an ally, right? So when you're like, oh, do I reach out to my Asian friend because, you know, this situation happened in the news with Asians? Have you done anything before that moment in time in order to even put yourself in a situation to understand the context of what's going on, right? Or do I reach out to my Black friend? Well, do you reach out to your Black friend when there isn't a Black person getting shot, right? Do you, like, is there a relationship there already? And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make with allyship is we go, oh crap, now I need to be an ally. That's not how it works, right? You need to, like, it's an internship. You can't I can't go to my VP and say, hey, look, make me an SVP. They're going to say, what have you done historically to make it so you deserve this role? Same thing with allyship. What have you done historically to make it so you deserve this role to be an ally in this moment in time right now? And that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned in being in Women's Impact Network.
Yeah, I'll just closing statement by echoing that completely. I think so much of being a feminist is being a good friend to women, being a good listener, like having relationships with people and knowing them and their community. Same with being like, I live in Nashville, Tennessee now, and I'm trying to be a good ally to communicate things that people don't understand here as much as they do in Seattle. And like, even with being an ally to the trans community, the biggest step I've taken towards that is just having trans friends and getting to know them and being there for them to listen to. And what James said about like reaching out, talking to one of our people in our coalition who's an Asian woman, and she was talking about her team all said, hey, how are you, when things happened? And she said it really like bothered her. And I said, aren't we supposed to do that? And she said, yeah, it bothered me because they'd never done that before. Right? They had never shown up and been her friend, got to know the work that she was doing, just known her as a human. And it goes back to what James said in the very beginning, like, and this is my understanding of it, know me as Black, but also know me as James, know me as a man, know me as a woman, but also know that I'm Asian, and also know the job that I do and my work, and be there for me before these things happen. And so much of allyship is that under the iceberg, right? The tip is showing up and leading a coffee tasting on Women's History Day because they asked you to and talking about it. Everything else is the hard shit behind the scenes. I have to actually have a hard stop, but I really appreciate this time.
Yeah, I know everyone kind of has to hop out, but thank you so much to AleQ and James. You guys are incredible. They're just great, like lovely people. So thank you also to everybody who showed up. Have a great 110 class if you're teaching it or attending it, and everybody else have good meetings. So yeah, I'll see you all later.